Welcome.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson, the Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, John Jeffrey, Ministers and Deputy Ministers from sister departments, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services, members of the National Council for Correctional Services, members of the parole boards, judges of our courts across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to table the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development budget. I also take this opportunity to extend warm congratulations to Madam Justice Mahube Beti Molemela, who has been appointed by the President as the Supreme Court President of Appeal, effective from the 1st of June 2023. We wish her well on executing her duties. On this day, 30 years ago, the Appellate Division delivered one of the most significant judgments, which dealt a massive blow to the apartheid scheme of racial segregation in the famous case of Oranse Administrace Ander versus Rekotso. Apartheid condemned Black families to live in rural areas removed from decent employment. Black men who find work in urban centers had to leave their families behind. If a man was employed continuously for 10 years at an exact location, he could claim that place as his permanent residence and his wife could join him. However, employers gave workers successive annual contracts of employment. The then government ruled that 10 subsequent yearly contracts at the exact location were not continuous employment for 10 years and did not entitle the worker's family to join him. This law had and dissembled thousands of Black families, units, and Black people who could not access permanent residence rights in the country of their birth. Today, the country's family unit is still reeling from the apartheid government policies that were aimed at disintegrating Black families. The judgment in Rekotso, delivered by the Appellate Division on this day, 1983, reversed this racist policy. It held that 10 successful annual contracts were 10 years of continuous employment. Let us acknowledge the lasting effects of this momentous decision on members of our communities and work together towards upholding justice and equality for all. Our past decisions have influenced our present, but we can collaborate to strive towards a brighter future. The Department of Justice and Constitutional Development plays a pivotal role, serving as the driving force behind the new society we desire to create through the lens of our Constitution. As Minister of Justice and Correctional Services since 2019, Deputy Minister Jeffrey and I have been working hard to address our department's many challenges. Unfortunately, external factors such as COVID-19 pandemic, ransomware attacks, and power outages have harmed our progress. Despite these obstacles, our efforts have yielded positive results. We have seen an overall improvement in the department's performance with the notable increases. In the 2022-23 financial year, the department's performance has increased to over 80%. The department's performance has increased by 30%. The performance increase is significant compared to our department's performance in the 2019-20 financial year. This improvement in the performance must now be translated to the actual realities our people face on a day-to-day when they look for our services or accessing our services. We have to cut the queues, the bureaucratic red tape that affect access to justice. Today, we table our budget for the financial year 2023-24, which amounts to 23.2 billion rands. The budget will enable the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development to uphold and protect the Constitution and the rule of law, and render accessible, fair, speedy, and cost-effective administration of justice in the interest of a safer and more secure South Africa. The budget allocation to the department is imperative for promoting safer communities and instilling trust in our criminal justice system. It will enable us to enhance our criminal justice system and effectively apprehend and prosecute criminals who threaten individuals and communities. We have outlined several priorities to achieve in our 2023-24 financial year. This includes strengthening institutions involved in fighting crime and corruption, implementing modernization and digitization initiatives, increasing access to justice, transforming the legal profession, systematically addressing gender-based violence and femicide, safeguarding the human rights of vulnerable groups, and dismantling outdated apartheid and colonial era legislation. We should not be deceived by the prophets of doom that we are a failed state. Where there are challenges, we must confront them. We can't bury our heads in the sands. Let me quote from Stephen Friedman when he wrote, "The failed state prejudice hides the fact that in many countries, including this one, states do some things well, even if they do many others badly. The South African state may get much wrong, but it has free and fair elections, independent courts, and enables its citizens to enjoy basic freedoms, even if only some have the means to enjoy them. This makes a real difference to people's lives. Millions living with HIV and AIDS are alive today, only because democracy's freedoms enables activists to fight for them. And so, when there are huge problems, there are also possibilities for change, which the failed state chorus cannot see. We have to rise and resolve the challenges that this country is facing. Making this country into one which everyone enjoys the rights which being citizens of a state is meant to offer may seem like a tall order, but it becomes impossible if we allow ourselves to be misled by prejudices posing as science." Unquote. Today marks the beginning of the court in Malawi to decide whether Messias Sipilelo Gama, well known as Shepherd Bushiri, and his wife are extraditable to South Africa or not. The relevant officials are in Malawi to give evidence as per the requirements of the courts of Malawi. We will await the outcomes of the hearing. This is a matter of national interest to South African government, and this shows that the wheels of justice are turning. We also commend the police for the swift arrest of fugitives, Rwandan national who was arrested here, wanted by the International Crimes Court. We will await the court processes. The South African government is firmly committed to fighting crime, fraud, and corruption. We have allocated a significant portion of our budget towards this critical mission. We must invest in this effort to ensure its success. To combat crime, fraud, and corruption, the National Prosecuting Authority overall allocation for 2023-24 amounts to 5.4 billion rands. These amounts include the additional grants of 950 million rands made by the government to strengthen our efforts in fighting crime and corruption. The investigative directorate is allocated a portion of 360 million rands out of the overall allocation. The National Prosecuting Authority and Special Investigation Unit enforce accountability for crime and maladministration. Notable, there have been significant progress in investigation corruption-related cases. To further secure this mission, government will propose new policies and amendments to protect whistleblowers and enhance the powers of the investigative directorate. The National Prosecuting Authority effectively deals with over 850,000 criminal cases yearly, with over 600,000 on court dockets. The progress made by the NPA is evident in the numbers and the success it has recorded. It is encouraging to see that they are growing from strength to strength. Although there have been some setbacks, they are not insurmountable and plans are in place to address them. Holding individuals accountable for their actions is essential. The increase in signed proclamations and civil action instituted in the high courts and the special tribunal is a positive sign. The Special Investigating Unit is also doing a great job investigating allegations of corruption and maladministration in government departments, municipalities, and state-owned enterprises. Ensuring the protection of whistleblowers is also very critical in the wheels of justice. Therefore, it is imperative to implement strong measures to safeguard them. Extensive research and evaluation of the protected disclosure and witness protection legislation in South Africa has uncovered gaps and shortcomings in the current system. The department conducted a comparative analysis with other jurisdictions to ensure adequate and effective whistleblower protection. According to our research, there are better ways to promote organizational transparency and accountability in that we are looking into. We intend to release the research paper for public comment in June. The research paper includes recommendations such as providing legal assistance to whistleblowers, enhancing internal police oversight, and creating a fund for those experiencing retaliations with financial implications. The National Prosecuting Authority Amendment Bill seeks to amend the legislation to make Investigative Directorate a permanent agency in the NPA, and not once created and disbanded by proclamations. The bill also enhanced the powers of the ID. Addressing the challenges and the findings of FAFTA. Government has introduced new laws to address FAFTA findings and enhance its capacity to prosecute financial crimes. The Regulation of Trust Bill seeks to regulate the establishment of trusts and provide for legislative measures on par with current socio-economic, jurisprudential, and practical landscapes in which trusts are created and operated. Additionally, the SIU and Council for Scientific and Industrial Research are collaborating to enhance the use of technology to fight the scourge of corruption and maladministration in the country. The department is committed to developing partnerships in the public service, the private sector, professional bodies, media, and international networking to mobilize all sectors to engage in this fight. Implementation of the modernization and the digitization program. The Department of Justice is taking proactive steps towards modernizing and digitizing its services to better service the public, especially in the light of COVID-19 pandemic. With a focus on upgrading its IT infrastructure, the department invests in state-of-the-art data center, equipment, and essential business applications, such as the Moja Pay, ICMS, and online services portals. The department has also implemented innovative court audio visual solutions, enabling parties to appear in court via video, eliminating the need for physical presence. To further streamline its systems, the department has connected 11 government departments entities to the Integrated Justice System Transversal Hub connectivity, which has successfully implemented a new system catering to enhance persons' integrated messages. The department has developed a piloted 6 online services as part of its ongoing efforts to improve them. During this financial year, the department is committed to piloting even more online services such as online master services and online protection orders. Through its commitment to modernization and digitization, the department seeks to enhance access to justice services and improve efficiency, making it easier for the public to obtain the help they need. By investing in new technologies, the department stays at the forefront of the digital age, providing safe and reliable services that meet the country's needs. Increasing access to justice, the department has allocated 589 million for its minimum service standards initiatives, which aims to provide court users with disabilities reasonable access to the courts. The initiative requires 70 courts to comply with universal access to standards for individuals with disabilities in the 2022-2023 financial year. Officials from these courts have received training on disability rights and how to meet the needs of persons with disabilities. Former Deputy Chief Justice Musaneke led a committee on rationalization of high courts, which has completed the phase of determining the areas over which the main local seats of every division of the high courts must exercise jurisdiction. The committee will commence phase 2 in June 2023 to evaluate the judicial establishment of each division of the High Court to ensure an equitable distribution of judicial posts across all divisions in the country. I am pleased to announce that Legal Aid South Africa's mean stance has changed to allow more people to access justice. From 1 April 2023, applicants falling under Regulation 2726 of Legal Aid South Africa Act 39 of 2014 faced a higher means test. The ESTA eviction matters will also have a new means test set at 13,625 rands under the ESTA Act. These changes aim to ensure a fair and accessible legal system for all individuals. The department has taken great initiatives to improve the justice system. The department has prepared 3 bills to improve the administration of justice: the Judicial Matters Amendment Bill, the Divorce Amendment Bill, and the South African Judicial Education Institute Amendment Bill. These bills will bring about effective changes and improve the legal system. We will also expand our capacity to address the impact of load shedding in our courts. As of March 2023, 120 courts across the country are equipped with generators or alternative power supply. To ensure that disruptions to court activities resulting from load shedding are kept to a minimum, DOJ has registered additional projects to install generators with the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure at various service points. The projects are at different phases of implementation. Transformation of the legal profession. The legal profession is undergoing significant changes in our country. Thanks to the department, the Legal Practice Council has registered many Black legal professionals, including women from disadvantaged communities. We aim to distribute briefs more equitable and recognize those instrumental in bringing about this change. We are committed to supporting programs like Free Wills Week and expanding them to include free estate advice for disadvantaged individuals. In the last financial year, PDI legal practitioners received 83% of briefs. Female practitioners received 28% and women received 40% from the Office of the State Attorney. This can be verified through the website of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development that keeps real-time data on these statistics. We call upon other organs of state to follow suit and the private sector to follow suit and publish their briefing patterns in line with what we have demonstrated. Systematically addressing gender-based violence and femicide. We have implemented phase 2 of the Femicide Watch, which aims to tackle gender-based violence and femicide. The department has developed user-friendly dashboard, which enables us to identify systematic issues with national laws and policies across all state departments. Phase 6 efforts to establish a national strategy for domestic violence court-based support services and measure the percentage of domestic violence protection orders submitted within 4 hours are praiseworthy. The legislation to repeal provisions that criminalize sex work, the DM is going to speak about it, that we have published for public inputs with regards to the bill and our findings. This dismantling apartheid and colonial era legislation. The South African Law Reform Commission will work diligently with all concerned parties to prepare the bill to modernize and review the Criminal Procedure Act. The Unconstitutional Reuters Assembly Act will be a significant focus, and we're confident its repeal and replacement will succeed. We're also actively addressing the unconstitutional findings of the Regulation of Interception of Communication and Provisions of Communication and Related Informations Act. The International Cooperation in Criminal Matters Amendment and Extradition Bill has been prepared and is ready for introduction. However, its introduction is pending the allowance and other priorities. Let us hope will be introduced soon and help fight against the criminal activities. With this budget, the department and its entities will carry out their constitutional and statutory mandates confidently and efficiently. This budget enables the department and its entities to execute this statutory responsibility. The department remains committed to promoting access to economic and business opportunities to qualifying small enterprises and exempted micro enterprises. In the latest financial year, the department allocated 71% of its discretionary procurement to these qualifying SMMEs. The finance branch will continue to support the department by allocating 40% of discretionary procurement to women-owned businesses. This commitment demonstrates the department's commitment to promoting equal opportunity within the procurement processes and supporting a diverse range of companies. We take great pride in our commitment to supporting BBEE-compliant businesses. In the financial year 2022-23, we were pleased to report that 91% of our procurement addressable spend was companies that met the criteria of being classified BEE. In conclusion, I would like to thank the Deputy Minister, John Jeffrey, for his continued support in leading the programs in the administration of justice portfolio, the Director General, Advocate Mashabane, and the senior management, the middle management, and all staff of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development for their tireless efforts. A special thanks goes to all heads and chairpersons of statutory bodies, distinguished members of the legal profession, and our social partners. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Chanji.
Thank you, House Chairperson, and thank you, Minister, for that comprehensive plan you've put forward. Let me greet everybody else, to all of you colleagues. I stand in for the Chairperson, Honorable Magwanishe. I want to wish him good luck in his exams today as he writes. We were highly dissatisfied by aspects of the justice plan. The department listened and revised its plan accordingly. Of course, there are still areas that we're monitoring as we go forward. We observe that the department continues to have many challenges, especially on the ground. We believe that with better planning and risk mitigation, a department will be better placed to tackle challenges it faces. We're concerned about key vacancies at senior management level, notably the positions of Chief Master, DDG Court Services, DDG Constitutional Development, and Head of the Justice College. And they have asked the department to report on what it's doing to fill these vacancies expeditiously. On a positive note, we are, however, are pleased to welcome Mr. Jabulani Tlajwayo to the position of DDG Information and Communications Technology. The appointment is made as the department seeks to reduce its dependence on outsourced contract ICT staff, strengthen its internal ICT infrastructure and capacity following a devastating cyber attack, and ramp up its modernization program. We know that the department intends to implement its turnaround strategy this year, and we will monitor the progress. The impact on court operations of crumbling, even dangerous infrastructure is significant and ongoing. These conditions are not conducive to service delivery. The department has attempted to address some of the challenges, for example, by engaging with the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure to raise the delegation for day-to-day maintenance delegation from 100,000 to $1 million per incident. However, in our view, the situation requires an extensive rethinking of the manner in which the state goes about seeing to its capital works program. In other words, this is more of a government-focused problem and not just a Justice Department issue. We remain concerned by the growing case backlogs, which have been described as insurmountable and pose a risk to the entire justice system. We welcome the new directives in terms of the Domestic Violence Act 2021 as progressive. These directives impose stricter duties on court officials when dealing with cases of domestic violence. You better listen here, boys, about domestic violence, Paulson. The department has also included several new indicators to measure court-based support services in domestic violence matters, which will closely monitor. We remain concerned by the deplorable state.
There's a point of order. Could you please take your seat?
Okay.
Honorable Paulson, what's the point of order?
Thank you, Chairperson. Will the member be prepared to take a question?
Are you prepared to take the question, Honorable Chanji?
I have no time to waste. So
I just want to ask about the 600,000 rand bribe that you tried to.
We remain concerned by the deplorable state of master services and have asked for further details about the plan to transform the master's office. We urge the department to finalize the position of the Solicitor General so that the recruitment process can begin, including capacitating that space. It's a very crucial space. We welcome the approval of various policies relating to the state litigation. These policies are targeted for implementation in 2023-2024. We welcome the implementation of a pilot project, the Program for Legal Empowerment and Access to Justice, which will provide financial support to community advice offices. The lessons learned will be used to develop policy for the sustainable of the sector. This is important for this person who's speaking here. I was a volunteer of an advice office. This is where I learned to do a typewriter kind of work. My first interaction with the world of work was at an advice office. We think this is a very important pilot project because I learned paralegal in that space many years ago. We note the department's plan to implement various online solutions in 2024, but are concerned about the connectivity challenges on the ground. We note that the NPA is allocated an additional 1.3 billion over the medium term to support the implementation of the State Capture Commission and Financial Action Task Force recommendations. In a positive development, the number of TCCs has increased from 55 to 62. Going forward, the NPA is working with the private sector to set up more TCCs. Legal Aid South Africa continues to struggle with funding with a reduced recruitment rate. The shortage of legal aid practitioners is contributing to the increased number of case backlogs in criminal courts. Also, fewer clients can be assisted in civil matters and with advice. We believe that the importance of Legal Aid South Africa as a strategic partner in our criminal justice system is not fully recognized when decisions are made concerning the allocation of resources. We need to work towards changing that. We're also concerned that the transfer of the legal representation function in land matters from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development to Legal Aid South Africa. Specifically, Legal Aid South Africa inherited 740 files with a contingent liability of 144.7 million, but no funding has been made available for this, which is unacceptable because they are now expected to do an unfunded job. We agree that the SIU's funding model must be addressed. We urge the finalization of the legislative amendments that will address the establishment of a permanent independent SIU, funding concerns, and the monitoring and enforcement of remedial action. Regrettably, in 65% of cases, the public protector's remedial action is not followed and no application for judicial review is instituted. The PPSA has begun to submit remedial action reports to the National Assembly quarterly, and in 2023-2024 intends to extend these submissions to the National Council of Provinces and provincial legislatures. The Public Protector Act is outdated. The proposed amendments include a criminal charge of contempt of the public protector for those who do not implement the remedial action of the public protector and have not applied for judicial review. In other words, if you are not applying for judicial review, you must implement the remedial action. You can't have it both ways. And we know there are certain culprits that are continuing to do that. We have repeatedly said that both the South African Human Rights Commission and the public protector are underfunded. These institutions form part of the architecture of our state. It is imperative that they be reasonably funded so that they can play their constitutionally mandated roles in support of our democracy. In our view, the funding allocated does not reflect an understanding of how important these institutions are. We're pleased to see that the information regulators' work is beginning to gain traction, and we note two recent enforcement notices, one being against the Justice Department and the other against SAPS in relation to the alleged rape of the aide. Failure to comply with the notice is an offense and can, on conviction, lead to imprisonment or a fine or both. The committee, having considered the annual performance plans 2023-2024 of the Department of Justice, Constitutional Development, the NPA, the Legal Aid South Africa, Public Protector South Africa, South African Human Rights Commission, and the Information Regulator, recommends that they be approved. The committee, having considered the budget vote 2025, Justice and Constitutional Development, supports it and recommends that it be approved. And so we move. And I've left time for both Uxola no Khomotso. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Janje. The Honorable Advocate Breitenbach.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. We also extend our good wishes to the Honourable Magonisha with his exams. I hope he does very well. And Mr. Yankee, just as an aside, the Honourable Yankee, we don't believe those stories about a bribe for one moment. We know you'd never settle for 200,000. Honourable House Chair, it is with deep concern that we must today address the performance, or rather the lack of performance, of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development and its Minister. While the Portfolio Committee has the great privilege to work with dedicated officials, some of whom are here today, doing their very best, the same cannot always be said of the Minister. While the Minister is great at making promises and delivering plans on paper, he has been unable to put them into operation and has focused on attempting to propel his own personal career within his party rather than make a success of the job he was given. This means that his term of office cannot be seen as a stellar success story. But we hope, Mr. Minister, that the Bushiri extradition goes better than the Gupta one. And just as an aside, 4 Bulgarians shot in Constantia before we can extradite them is not a success story, it's a failure of law and order. The Department of Justice is tasked with upholding the Constitution, the rule of law, ensuring access to justice, and ensuring that justice is served fairly and equally to all citizens. The Department and the Minister have failed in this duty, and South Africans are far worse off now than they were 5 years ago. Naught has come of the great plans that have been held up in this House. One of the most pressing issues facing our justice system is the rampant corruption that has infiltrated every level of government and society. Despite an endless number of high-profile corruption cases, very few of them have been held accountable for their actions. Certainly none of the high-profile kingpins have been held to account. This sends a clear message to the public that those in power are above the law and that justice is only available to those with enough money and influence. It demonstrates unequivocally that well-connected people can avoid accountability and the low-hanging fruit are the only ones held accountable. In addition to corruption, our justice system is plagued by a lack of resources, including inadequate funding and staffing. This has resulted in a constantly growing backlog of cases, with many accused individuals waiting years for their day in court. This backlog is particularly egregious in cases of gender-based violence, where survivors often wait for years to see their perpetrators brought to justice. The Department's response to these challenges has been inadequate at best and negligent at worst. They are constantly confronted with failures that could easily have been avoided by doing the obvious. IT and other vital systems are paralyzed by a lack of maintenance and an apparent inability to ensure that proper contract management is in place. The recent smackdown from the information regulator is an indication of this state of affairs. Maintenance issues are not attended to and the results are obvious. The collapse of the roof of the Potchefstroom Magistrates Court is a telling example and is still not being repaired. Last week, no toilet facilities were available at all at the Cape Town Regional Court. A shocking indictment on the department. At a meeting last week of the Portfolio Committee to address these shortcomings with the Minister and the Minister of Public Works, it was disappointing but not surprising when the Minister of Justice could find no space in his diary to attend, leaving the newly appointed Minister of Public Works to carry the can alone. This lack of action has resulted in a crisis of confidence in our justice system, with many citizens losing faith in the ability of the department and its Minister to uphold the rule of law. This has a ripple effect throughout society, undermines the legitimacy of our government and erodes public trust in our institutions. The performance of the Master's Office remains abysmal. One only has to refer to the long queues forming daily at the Master's offices throughout the country to understand that the entire edifice of the Master's offices nationally has all but ceased to function. The Minister's answer to this is to appoint an acting Chief Master who has no powers and is by all accounts not qualified to the position. This crisis of confidence is particularly acute amongst vulnerable populations, including women, children, and LGBTQI+ individuals who are often disproportionately affected by corruption, violence, and the backlog of cases. No discussion of the performance of the department would be complete without reference to the National Prosecuting Authority. The NPA is responsible for prosecuting criminal cases in our country and ensuring that justice is served. However, the NPA has not succeeded in gaining the confidence of South Africans that it is capable or even improving its capability to deal with high-profile matters and corruption in particular. The NPA has been palpably slow to act on cases, leading to long delays in justice. Many instances, cases have dragged on for years, and some cases have been dismissed altogether due to a lack of process. This not only denies justice to the victims of these crimes, but creates a culture of impunity for criminals. It undoubtedly makes the game seem worth the candle, and we are not winning. South Africans do not feel safe in their own country, nor even in their own homes. In addition to these issues, the NPA has been operating under severe lack of resources and capacity. This has resulted in a growing backlog of cases, and the response to this has been inadequate. Despite repeated calls for reform, the NPA has failed to take decisive action to address internal corruption, slow progress on cases, and the backlog. This failure has undermined public trust in the NPA and the justice system as a whole, creating a crisis of confidence that will be very difficult to dispel. We also acknowledge freely that there have been many dedicated hard work prosecutors who go to work each day and do their best under exceptionally difficult conditions. They keep the wheels of justice turning and achieve some notable successes. To them, we convey our heartfelt thanks. In order to regain public trust and confidence and improve its rather tarnished image, the NPA must take steps to ensure that cases are prosecuted much more speedily. Additionally, the NPA must be provided with resources and capacity needed to address the backlog of cases and speed up progress of ongoing cases. The NPA must prioritize cases involving violence against women and children, ensuring that survivors are not left waiting for justice for years. During his budget speech last year, the minister told us that the judiciary had submitted the institutional models report to the executive in 2013, wherein their preferred court administration model was outlined. As part of his commitment to implement the National Development Plan 2030 and also to respond to the judiciary, he told us that he intended during this past financial year to approach Cabinet to finalize this outstanding matter. Not surprisingly, this has not yet been finalized. The minister has not succeeded in restoring faith in our justice system, and this will be his legacy. He will be remembered for failing when he had a duty to do so, to take steps to protect citizens after the escape of a convicted serial rapist and murderer. This minister, it's a good time for you to reflect, and in the very limited time you have left, to do better. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Breitenbach. The Honorable Yako.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'm standing in front of you today as one of the foot soldiers of the most dynamic, the most ideologically advanced political movement in this country, in the continent, and in the world today. The Economic Freedom Fighters is a movement of the poor, a movement of the downtrodden, a representative of the domestic workers, of petrol attendants, of mine workers, of security guards, of cleaners and gardeners. The EFF is turning 10 years old this year on the 26th of July. In the spirit of the struggle for economic freedom and justice in our lifetime, of the struggle for socialism in this country and across the entire world, we do reject this uninspired budget vote. We do this because access to justice has become an elusive dream for millions of our people, for whom courts remain out of reach because of the exorbitant costs it takes for one to access justice. The minister is going to come and say that the Legal Aid Board is meant to enable the poor access to justice. But he knows clearly well that while the Legal Board has competent staff who obviously know the law, these people are often overworked and poorly managed. There's no thorough preparation for cases because of this pressure placed on legal aid attorneys. The minister has known this for years, and yet nothing has been done to ensure that the board is properly staffed to guarantee quality legal representation for our people. Chairperson, after the lockdowns were imposed to manage the spread of COVID, we've seen unprecedented reports of evictions of farm workers and farm dwellers across the country, but particularly here in the Western Cape. This is because the piece of legislation purported to protect them from these evictions, which is the extension of Security of Tenure Act, is simply a tool at the hands of farmers to facilitate the eviction of farm workers and dwellers. But most concerning, Minister, is that magistrates often collide with farmers, and some of them are not properly trained to deal with the eviction matters. What makes things worse is that since the Land Rights Management Facility was transferred from the Department of Land Reform to the Legal Aid Board, there's been no clarity on who must instruct attorneys to defend those vulnerable to evictions. As a result, the Legal Aid Board has not instructed any legal practitioner to defend the rights of those evicted from farms by racist farmers. This is on you and your failure of imagination, Minister. The Land Claims Court is itself an absolute tatters. The acting president of the Land Claims Court is enjoying herself here in Cape Town for most of the time, leaving that court without leadership. Matters are not enrolled for hearings on time, and some community matters have been gathering dust in that court for years. We have asked you this, you refuse to provide answers. The building itself is like a dumping site, and no efforts have been taken to ensure that it provides for an intellectually stimulating environment. It is no surprise that that court has become a tool at the hands of racists who evict our people left, right, and center. They don't even know how many cases they've heard just over the past 5 years because they do not keep records. That court is a disaster and a shame to our judiciary. Minister, the NPA has not prosecuted any of the high-profile criminal cases that should be a low-hanging fruit for them in this country. They have told us that they do not possess any capacity to prosecute racist criminals such as Marcus Joost, and you have also shown us your incompetence by bungling up their so-called reparation of the Gupta family. The investigative directorate is as toothless as the NPA itself. To date, that directorate has not done any of the things that we expected out of it. Many high-profile criminals are walking around unbothered, and many of them, including their enablers, are walking around with blue lights as cabinet ministers in this country. Your greatest crime, however, must be your complicity in the continued persecution of the public protector. You have stood by and perhaps tacitly watched the destruction of the office of the public protector in order to save just one person. The acting public protector is simply an extension of your factional battles in the ruling party and is now in that office to protect Mr. Ramaphosa and those in your faction, Minister. So you ought to be really ashamed of yourself and what you've become. We need justice to be accessible to our people, and we need it in emergency. The NPA must be free of corruption and prosecute without fear or favor, because that is the only way we would regain their tattered dignity. This means that you must abandon that foolish idea that of allowing foreign funding in the NPA, and we must guard against the independence of the NPA jealously and not sell it off to the highest bidder, as you have done, Mr. Lamola. So therefore, we reject this budget vote.
Thank you, Honorable Yako. The Honorable Msema,
Chairperson,
Honorable Hadebe, what's the point of order?
yes, Chairperson, I'm rising on Rule 85. The members just cast aspersions on the character of the minister by saying that he has sold the NPA to the highest bidder. It must come to a substantive motion.
Honorable Hadebe, I have noted it. Thank you. Honorable Prof, you can go ahead. Ngaqhubeka Mbam Msema. Ngaqhubeka Baba Msema.
Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister, honorable members. This budget serves as a critical component in our democratic and constitutional check and balance order in ensuring that our country upholds the rule of law and protects the rights of all citizens. However, there remain various challenges which must be addressed. Importantly, these must be done whilst we simultaneously focus on transforming the judiciary and embrace technology to assist in alleviating cumbersome court processes related administrative burdens. Our legal services remain poorly funded and unacceptable to many, which leads in many instances to a denial of justice. This is patently unconstitutional, and we must ensure that the legal aid South Africa receives adequate funding to provide quality and easily accessible legal services to those in need, particularly our most vulnerable groups such as women, children, the elderly, disabled, and the rural poor. Another perennial challenge we face is the underfunding of the National Prosecuting Authority. The NPA plays a critical role in ensuring that perpetrators of crime are brought to justice. However, the NPA is struggling with insufficient resources. This leads to case backlogs, lengthy court proceedings, and in many instances, unsatisfactory results. We must increase the funding for the NPA to ensure that justice is delivered swiftly and efficiently. Chairperson, wildlife crime is a serious growing problem in South Africa that continues to warrant our most urgent attention. Poaching and the illegal trade in wildlife products are having devastating impacts on our natural resources and biodiversity, as well as on the livelihoods of local communities. To effectively combat wildlife crime, we need specialist wildlife crime courts, prosecutors, and magistrates. The establishment of such specialist wildlife courts, prosecutors, magistrates will send a strong message that South Africa is serious about combating wildlife crime. We must also ensure that our courts are representative of the diversity of our society through transformation of our judiciary, and there is adequate training and support for judges and magistrates. Technology must be embraced to assist with alleviating administrative burdens. This will not only improve efficiency, but also reduced cost of administration. If we turn to the Department of Correctional Services, we still find significant challenges with overcrowding and understaffing in our prisons. This problem leads to poor conditions for inmates and additionally poses security risks. Corruption remains rife and the system needs a full audit and overhaul if we are to make inroads into reducing inmate recidivism. In conclusion, by addressing these challenges, we can ensure that justice is delivered efficiently and effectively in our country, and the IFP supports this budget vote. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mr. Banga. The Honorable Mulder.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair, Honorable Minister Ramola, Deputy Minister Jeffries, to the official minority present in the House today, on my right and on my left side to the official coalition, multi-party coalition government in awaiting on my left. Honorable Chair, let me share the slogan of the Freedom Front Plus with you today. It's the NPA van Wyk Lou slogan that says, justice, no freedom without justice. Geen vryheid sonder regverdigheid. Honorable House Chair, in the debate today, I wish to draw the attention on what the inevitable result is when the 5 programs of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development fail to meet its constitutional mandate due to poor governance, not only because of the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, but in fact also due to the devastating effect of poor governance state capture, corruption that resulted in substantial budget cuts made in the 2022-23 financial year, limiting the capacity of the department to support and bring cases to court. When the supporting entities of the department, for example, the National Prosecuting Authority, the Special Investigating Unit, and the Judiciary fail, it results in what I'm about to share with the House today. Our courts are understaffed, overwhelmed. It is not uncommon to be awarded a hearing or a trial date, be present in court, ready to proceed with a trial, and on the day told that the trial cannot proceed as there are too few judges in courtrooms. It is not uncommon to sit in a court, ready to proceed with a trial, having obtained both the courtroom and the judge, and been told that the trial cannot proceed as there are too few or no interpreters available for a specific indigenous language. It is in fact very uncommon that a trial is scheduled for a specific date to proceed as planned or without any foreseen circumstances causing the postponement thereof. The courts are completely and desperately overburdened by paperwork and caseload, and files are misplaced and go missing on a daily basis. The courts are further understaffed for the loads that they carry, and it is simply a case of too much work for too few hands to carry. To exacerbate the problems, the courts are notoriously archaic in their methods of dealing with paperwork, in that the large number of courts are notoriously dealing with paperwork in that they still rely on physical paper file being held by an office within each building. Documents required to be present in the files are physically filed at the court, and the court personnel are required to place such physical document in the said appropriate file. When dealing with a load of files in the millions, this is simply not workable, and it seems obvious that files and documents will go missing without much negligence being involved. House Chair, where the state fails, South African citizens seek alternatives and provide the services that the state is supposed to provide with taxpayers' money. Many legal practitioners have now taken to favoring alternative dispute resolutions mechanisms, such as the mediation, rather than traditional litigation. In fact, even the rules of court make it mandatory for litigants to consider mediation, seemingly to activate or to alleviate the case loads of the court. Unfortunately, there are some cases that are simply too contentious to be mediated, and many of these get stuck for many years before getting a day in court. Private prosecution is further more commonly used than ever before, and although the right to private prosecution is not absolute, the right arises when the state has declined to prosecute, which is more commonly the case. All of this with after-tax money, Honourable House Chair and Minister, as it is the case with education, healthcare, community safety, and electricity, amongst others. South Africans have to determine their own destiny when the state failed with after-tax money. The state of affairs is not sustainable, and an urgent solution should be found, either with a new dispensation or a new government. Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The Honorable Swartz.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honourable Minister, the central role of the state is to protect its citizens, and sadly, citizens do not feel safe in their homes, public, at schools, or places of employment. And we see criminal syndicates targeting our SOEs, such as Eskom, Transnet. And we also see the so-called construction mafia preventing much-needed infrastructure being built. And this despite the National Development Plan requiring that the state should build safer communities, promote accountability and fight corruption, and strengthen judicial governments and the rule of law. Lawlessness sadly seems to be on the increase. And in our view, in the ACDP's view, the state is failing dismally to protect its citizens. Chairperson, the detectives are at the crux of the criminal justice system. Poor investigations lead to poor detection and conviction rates. And sadly, there's been a continual decline in detection rates if one considers the police annual report and its budget report. That is why the ACDP supports prosecutor-driven criminal investigations and why we support the amendments that are to be brought to the NPA Act to establish the investigating directorate as an independent agency in the NPA. Minister, we need that amendment as soon as possible. It should not be delayed. And why then, Honourable Minister, are we then having the department dealing with the proposed decriminalization of prostitution, which the Deputy Minister, I understand, is going to deal with? But may I just also say, Deputy Minister, you've got an appalling fashion with scarves. Surely you had something better to wear. And I would like to just say, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. So as far as it goes with the decriminalization, Deputy Minister, if we considered what we did in the previous parliaments, and if one considers the SA Law Reform Commission given, then we are surprised at this proposed amendment that is coming from the Justice Department, given the fact that there is no regulations in place, and given the breakdown of morality and families in our nation, it is staggering. Thankfully, that will only be dealt with by the next parliament. Chairperson, I would also like to indicate the ACDP, after meeting with the Chief Justice and the heads of court, together with other members, the judiciary complained about the long-delayed judiciary-led administration model, which is yet to be finalized. Minister, you indicated that this will receive attention and hopefully that will be finalized before the end of this term. We're also grateful for the Judicial Matters Bill and the expungement of COVID-19 offences, which has been considered. Thousands of normally law-abiding citizens who committed trivial offences and after paying admission of guilt fines now sit with criminal records. And we are pleased as that cannot be correct and affects employment opportunities. The ACDP would like to thank all those members at the back, the DG, and those dedicated police officials, detectives, prosecutors, magistrates, and other members of the judiciary who on a daily basis and under severe financial constraints deliver justice to our citizens. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Sir. The Honourable Deputy Minister of Justice and Correctional Services.
I'm wearing, Mr. Swart, this kufiya in solidarity with the human rights of the people of Palestine. It does not have to be one or the other, as you like putting it. I'm also standing in solidarity with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer people from Uganda. As we enter the last year of the current administration, there's a renewed commitment and a sense of urgency to finalize and complete all the outstanding initiatives and programs which we'd undertaken to do at the start of this administration. Service delivery and access to justice for all remain utmost priorities for our department. Access to justice is not just access to the courts, it means access to justice services, to be assisted with dignity by efficient justice officials, to know one's constitutional rights, how to access these rights, and to know where to go when these rights are infringed. We continue to support and strengthen our magistrates' courts as best we can. Our magistrates' courts face a number of challenges on a daily basis. These contribute to case backlogs. Backlog cases are cases which are on the roll for more than 6 months in the district courts and more than 9 months in the regional courts. There are many different reasons why cases are postponed, such as, amongst others, load shedding, water outages, the unavailability of interpreters, postponement for further investigation, the unavailability of legal practitioners, prosecutors, or magistrates, and/or malfunctioning court equipment. Some of these factors fall within the area of our responsibility of our department, whilst others are the responsibility of other criminal justice stakeholders. All these reasons for postponements are continuously being tracked and monitored so that appropriate interventions can be made where these fall within the responsibility of the department. Where they do not, we engage with other relevant stakeholders or the relevant stakeholder. To combat the challenges of load shedding and water outages, the department has introduced a national facilities project for the installation of inverters, generators, solar systems, boreholes, and water tanks in our courts. Of paramount importance going forward is the rationalization of the judicial establishment of the lower courts, as it will ensure that we have the correct number of district and regional magistrates at each court. The Committee on the Rationalization of the Lower Courts Judicial Establishments, under the chair of Mr. Sam Makamu, is making progress and is expected to submit their report by the end of November this year. Some of the vacant magistrates' posts cannot be filled if it's likely that a post may be moved to another court. There are, however, still acting magistrates appointed to these positions. Chairperson, access to justice also means improving the protection of the rights of those who are vulnerable and making it easier for them to access the justice system, as well as receiving the necessary support. The recently passed 3 GBV Amendment Acts, which are now all in effect, have drastically changed the architecture of the legal framework in the gender-based violence and femicide sector. One of the salient changes introduced by the Amendment Acts is the recognition of nonverbal communications as oral evidence. A witness under the age of 18 years or any witness who suffers from a physical, psychological, mental, or emotional condition which inhibits their ability to give oral evidence may use demonstrations, gestures, or any nonverbal expression, including the use of communication devices when testifying. In the previous financial year, the department amended the minimum standards for the strategy on reasonable accommodations and measures to access justice for court users with disabilities in line with these legal developments. Some 70 lower courts were upgraded in line with these minimum standards to provide reasonable accommodations and disability-centric support services. A total of 145 disability-centric courts have been established nationwide in the previous 2 financial years, and in this financial year, the department plans to upgrade an additional 65 lower courts to offer these reasonable accommodations. The National Prosecuting Authority has seen significant improvements in the expansion of its Tutuzela care centers, or TCCs, while maintaining high sexual offences conviction rates with a current conviction rate of 76%. To date, there are 63 operational TCCs located in rural, urban, and peri-urban communities nationally. The Juzini TCC in northern KwaZulu-Natal, which became operational on the 1st of May, is the most recent addition. Government's National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence, the NSP, provided further impetus for the NPA to forge private partnerships to increase the number of TCCs and to reaccommodate or renovate existing TCCs. One such partnership with MediClinic resulted in the first TCC to be housed in an unused university residence of the University of Stellenbosch. It is targeted to be launched as the Stellenbosch TCC later this year. To enhance access for the physically disabled, all TCCs are equipped with ramps. In preparation for the declaration of sign language as the 12th official language, the NPA's SOCA unit collaborated with the deaf community and the Wits Centre for Deaf Studies to produce a South African sign language video which welcomes deaf victims or survivors to the TCC, explains the TCC process and what each role player does. With the unabated increase in sexual violence in the country, the court system has to be responsive and more accessible to survivors of sex crimes, so as to increase reporting and the use of courts while reducing the withdrawal rate by complainants in these cases. With regard to our sexual offences courts, one of the provisions of the Judicial Matters Amendment Bill, which is currently before this House, amends Section 55A of the Sexual Offences Act to enable the minister to designate specific regional court places of sitting as sexual offences courts. Currently, the definition of a regional court is the regional court of a province, which includes all places of sitting. The Criminal and Related Matters Amendment Act further recognizes the use of ad hoc intermediaries at criminal and non-criminal proceedings. Previously, intermediary services were limited to child witnesses and persons with mental disabilities, but they're now available to older persons as well as witnesses who suffer from a physical, psychological, mental, or emotional condition. In order to increase the national numerical capacity of our intermediaries, in this financial year, the department plans to employ an additional 100 ad hoc intermediaries to appear at criminal and civil proceedings. Pursuant to the recent changes introduced by this Parliament in the management of the National Register of Sex Offenders, which were made in response to demands made by women in 2018 under the umbrella of #Total Shutdown, the department has since the 31st of July last year amended this register to include particulars of all convicted sex offenders, irrespective of age and the mental status of the sex crime victim. I'd also then urge educators, lecturers, and other workers at tertiary institutions, social workers, healthcare workers, caregivers, employees at preschools and nurseries, employees at civil society organizations, and other persons who offer services directly to vulnerable persons to apply for NRSO clearance certificates, as failure to do so amounts to a punishable offense. The department will also be introducing an online NRSO application solution to make these services more accessible. The integrated electronic repository for protection orders will be developed in this financial year to ensure that the whole of the Domestic Violence Amendment Act can come into effect. When this act came into operation on the 14th of April this year, Section 6A, which requires the Director General of Justice to establish this repository, was excluded. Through this repository, our courts will, amongst others, be able to be aware of protection orders made by another court. In this financial year, the department will also be developing a national strategy for domestic violence to create a seamless chain of value support services to survivors of domestic violence in the criminal justice system. Chairperson, the violence and discrimination faced by the LGBTIQ+ community is rooted in historic and systemic discrimination linked to intolerance in some religious, cultural, and traditional beliefs, as well as South Africa's colonial and apartheid past. Our Constitution, as well as the legislative provisions such as the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, provide explicit protection against violence and discrimination, yet the LGBTIQ+ community continues to face stigmatization, violence, and discrimination in their daily lives. Many also report that they have challenges in accessing services from some of the government and other service providers. We're currently once again reviewing the National Intervention Strategy, or the NIS, on sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, and sex characteristics matters, so as to ensure the activities in this NIS continue to meet with the needs of LGBTIQ+ people. The National Task Team, or NTT, on gender and sexual orientation-based violence perpetrated against such persons was initially established to respond to hate crimes against these communities. However, as the adoption of the GBV and Femicide National Strategic Plan includes violence against queer people, this means that the NTT has to reconsider its role. As a result, the reviewed NIS now addresses issues of access to broader human, socioeconomic, civil, and political rights to LGBTIQ+ people in South Africa. The NIS focuses on prevention programs to address violence and unfair discriminations on the grounds of sexual orientation, gender identity, etc., as well as working with faith-based organizations, traditional leaders, human rights organizations, public officials, and institutions. It also includes capacity building of all officials at service points and service providers in order to address secondary victimization. Chairperson, as many are aware, in November last year, Cabinet approved the publishing of the Criminal Law Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Bill of 2022 with regard to the decriminalization of sex work for public comments. The bill aims to repeal the Sexual Offences Act, previously the Immorality Act of 1957, and also to repeal Section 11 of the Criminal Law Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act of 2007, to decriminalize the sale and purchase of adult sex services. Sex work and the question of how the South African legal system should respond to sex work has been the subject of considerable debate in South Africa. The proposals of this bill respond to the list of interventions proposed in Pillar 3, which is the Protection, Safety and Justice pillar of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, which enjoins the criminal justice system to provide protection, safety, and justice for survivors of gender-based violence and to effectively hold perpetrators accountable for their actions. Pillar 3 contains a list of key interventions, key activities, and indicators. One of the key activities under Pillar 3 is the finalization of legislative processes to decriminalize sex work, fast-tracking, and promulgation. This follows the view that the ongoing criminalization of sex work contributes to gender-based violence and femicide, as it leaves sex workers unprotected by the law, unable to exercise their rights, and open to abuse generally, not least when they approach state facilities for assistance. The bill was published for public comment, with a closing date for comments being the end of January this year. The bill only deals with decriminalization of sex work as an urgent step to ensure better protection for sex workers from gender-based violence and femicide, with the intention being to consider regulation as the second stage in the process. In preparing the bill for final approval by Cabinet, concerns have been raised by the state law advisors that the bill may not pass constitutional muster if it does not also provide for the regulation of sex work. This view is supported by a legal opinion obtained from a senior counsel. This means that we will not be able to, at this point, proceed with the bill in its current form. We will therefore be engaging with role players and drafting provisions on the regulation of sex work so as to ensure that a revised bill is ready for introduction at the beginning of the next administration. The decriminalization of sex work and the human rights of sex workers remains high on government's human rights agenda, though, Mr. Swart. To conclude, honorable members, we're entering the last year of the current administration. We don't have time to waste. We've 1 year left of this term in which to make a difference in the lives of people and to ensure our communities receive their services that they're entitled to. This budget will enable us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Minister. ATM, the Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Yes, Honorable Papo, we were together. Yes, indeed. And we are together in the struggle to free and liberate Palestinians. No doubt about it. Let me start off by saying, first of all, Honorable Chairperson, and there's over 971 detainees that endure physical torture, isolation, and deliberate medical neglect at the hands of Israelis in Palestine.
There's a point of order.
No, Chair.
What is your point of order, Honorable Swart?
Take a question, please. Would the honorable member take a question about the persecution of Muslims in other
Honorable
countries?
Imam, would you like to take a question?
Chairperson, if he gives me his 3 minutes next time, I can then answer his questions. Thank you. I don't have time for it now. But let me also say, while we talk about justice, 16 women were raped by Israeli soldiers in Palestine. And not only raped, Chairperson, that video recordings, which were used to blackmail these women for a long period of time, over 20 years. This is how serious the situation is. And you have people coming here to try and defend the barbaric actions of Israel, who has in no other way to explain it, but have gone there and unlawfully stolen the land that belongs to the Palestinian people, be that as it may. Honorable Chairperson, we got up with some very bad news this morning. 6 deaths in Mitchell's Plain, 6 young children going to school. And it appears that a taxi did not comply with the regulations. But of course, our condolences to the family and friends. 6 innocent children lost their lives. Now, the Department of Justice particularly is under tremendous pressure. Yes, it's come to litigation, not forgetting political party squabbles. But very importantly, I think with the high levels of crime. Now, can you imagine if one detective sits with over 200 dockets, what an impact it has on the entire justice system in the country? So I think we must be mindful of the fact that unless we deal with those root causes of what is causing these high levels of crime, the impact it's going to have on the justice system and the demand for more and more officials and more budget is going to increase. We must understand that. We must accept that. But be that as it may, we seem to have a problem as far as maintenance officers particularly. I think many people are self-employed and there is very little or no means of being able to identify or establish what is their true earnings. And many people are evading it. I think another thing that we need to look at, Minister and Deputy Minister, is the quality and the process we follow in terms of appointments. If you saw what happened in the weekly newspaper this week on the allegations made against the judge, Judge Sidwell Mgadi, and more often we seem to be having complaints coming in. It's something I think we need to be more stringent. We need to address so that, because once people lose trust and confidence in the judiciary, which is the last line of protection for our people, you know, and then we have a serious problem in the country. We agree that the budget allocation is not enough, given the high demand, is particularly with the Department of Justice. But again, I think you need to strengthen your relationship with the South African police services. And of course, many cases are being withdrawn because of poor police work. The National Freedom Party, given limited time, will support this budget vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Imam. The Honorable Ramulove.
Thank you, House Chair. Members of the House, heads of the Chapter 9 institutions and entities receiving their budget allocation within this vote, compatriots, comrades, and friends, the ANC supports Budget Vote 25. Addressing a rally in Durban shortly after his release from prison, Dr. Nelson Mandela said, I quote, "Since my release, I have become more convinced than ever that the real makers of history are the ordinary men and women of our country. Their participation in every decision about the future is the only guarantee of true democracy and freedom." Close quote. Our National Development Plan Vision 2030 places emphasis on active citizenry. It states that all in South Africa must contribute and work towards realizing the vision of a cohesive society. It says that government needs citizens to speak out when things are going wrong. Active citizenry and social activism are necessary for democracy and development to flourish. The state cannot merely act on behalf of the people. It has to act with the people, working together with other institutions to provide opportunities for the advancement of all communities. These sentiments are also echoed in the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular Goal 16, which calls for peace, justice, and strong institutions. The Sustainable Development Goals highlights that without peace, stability, human rights, and effective governance based on the rule of law, we cannot hope for sustainable development. It states that we are living in a world that is increasingly divided. Some regions enjoy sustained levels of peace, security, and prosperity, while others fall into seemingly endless cycle of conflict and violence. This is by no means inevitable and must be addressed. Some of the specific aims of the Sustainable Development Goals oblige us to promote the rule of law at the national and international levels and ensure equal access to justice for all, develop effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels, ensure responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making at all levels, and ensure public access to information and protect fundamental freedoms in accordance with national legislation and international agreements. Chairperson, one of the Department of Justice primary aims is to ensure an accessible justice system that promotes constitutional values and to promote transparent, responsive, and accountable justice services. Access to justice is a constitutional imperative. It is a fundamental right that unlocks access to all other rights enshrined in our Constitution. Giving due regard to the triple challenge of poverty, inequality, and unemployment, this right has the power to transform our society into a just and equitable one by improving social and economic conditions. Our transformative Constitution forms the bedrock of our quest to improve the quality of life for all in South Africa. The courts remain the coalface in delivering justice, and to ensure that this happens, we rely on an efficient, effective judiciary. As the ANC, we remain committed to the independence of the judiciary in our country because it is our view that for justice to be seen, it must be impartial of all social, economic, and political stakeholders on the various conflicts litigated in our courts. We cannot talk to access of justice without talking about legal representation. In the case of Tantalala versus Janji, the Supreme Court of Appeal observed that common law An accused had a right to be advised on his right to legal representation, and in particular of availability of legal aid through Legal Aid Board. House Chair, we appreciate the important role played by Legal Aid South Africa. It ensures that even those who cannot afford receive sustainable, ethical, quality, and independent legal services. For too long in our history, our people suffered injustice because they either did not know their rights or could not access their rights. Legal representation gives meaning to the transformative rights in our constitution, even in the face of budgetary constraints. Legal Aid South Africa is excelling in meeting its obligations, and this House Chair must be commended. Another way the department has made justice more accessible is by a way of small claims court. These courts function on the basis of speed, simplicity, and cost effectiveness. They provide a forum for the resolution of certain civil claims up to 15,000. No legal representations are allowed in these courts. Small claims courts were created with a view to eliminate time-consuming adversarial procedures before and during the trial. We have a functioning small claims court in every magisterial district across the country. House Chair, as the sixth administration draws to an end, we take stock of what President Ramaphosa said in his inaugural State of Nation address. We will urgently attend to the leadership issues at the National Prosecuting Authority to ensure that this critical institution is stabilized and able to perform its mandate unhindered, without fear, without favor, and prejudice. We must acknowledge the significant progress made in this regard. The ANC government is committed in the fight against fraud, corruption, and maladministration, Honorable Breitenberg. In strengthening the fight against crime and corruption, the 2023 ANC Lekgotla noted progress in key areas in the security sector. This includes the additional recruitment of police officers and the strengthening of key institutions such as the National Prosecuting Authority. Lekgotla called for an integrated program which will ensure that South Africa is a crime-free society by 2030. We appreciate the significant progress in renewing the NPA and the reinstatement of the Aspirant Prosecutors Program, which has seen more than 1,000 new employees brought into the fold over the past 3 years. One of the weak points which have been identified in the criminal justice system is a silo approach in the fight against fraud and corruption. Today, House Chair, we see a greater levels of collaboration and coordination between the Investigative Directorate, Asset Forfeiture Unit, the Specialized Commercial Crime Unit, Special Investigating Unit, and the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigations. We appreciate that the department has received additional allocation totaling to 3.7 billion. The majority of which is allocated to the National Prosecuting Authority to strengthen capacity and advance the recommendation of the State Capture Commission. Chairperson, Madiba said, we speak here of a challenge of the dichotomies of war and peace, violence and non-violence, racism and human dignity, oppression and repression, and liberty and human rights, poverty and the freedom of want. It is important for us as legislators to reflect on what we have done to address some of these dichotomies. Among others, we have passed progressive legislation, including the Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Bill, which reaffirms the right to human dignity. We have recently passed the Constitutional 18th Amendment Bill to have South African Sign Language as the 12th official language. We have enacted legislation which affords the protection and promotion of rights of women and children, and the legislation that will ensure land justice. We have built strong state institutions, House Chair. We have played and continue to play an oversight role over the department to ensure that South Africa is a better place for all. Much has been done and much still needs to be done. House Chair, the ANC supports vote 25. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable members, can I get your attention, please? The ruling on point of order raised by the Honorable Hadebe against the Honorable Yako. The reason why I only noted the point of order made by the Honorable Hadebe is because I wanted to give it some more attention for clarity purposes. After the Honorable Yako had finished her speech, Honorable Hadebe raised a point of order from the visual platform. His point of order was made on Rule 85, which prohibits a member from imputing improper motives to another member, casting personal reflections upon a member's integrity or dignity, or verbal abuse of a member in any other way. Following rule number 92, a point of order must be confined only to a matter of parliamentary procedure or practice, or a matter relating to unparliamentary conduct as defined, and must be raised immediately when the alleged breach of order occurs. So we always emphasize that the point of order must be raised immediately when the alleged breach of order occurs. The point of order by the Honorable Hadebe came at a time when it was the Honorable Msimang on the platform. So it was late. While it could have, if it could have come at the right time, we could have sustained it, but because it came late, I would not sustain it. So it's not out of order.
Chairperson.
Honorable Hadebe, let's not come to that.
Chairperson, there's a problem with the House and the visual platform. There's a problem of time lag.
Honorable
The
Hadebe,
ICT system, that's why last week I wrote a letter to the speaker.
Honorable Hadebe, I rule you out of order. I rule you out of
Please,
order.
Chair.
I rule you out of order.
Oh, man.
The Honorable Jafta is on the virtual platform.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The Department of Justice and Constitutional Development is facing a number of complex challenges. The work of the State Capture Commission laid bare a complex web of corruption and abuse of state resources, driven not only in the NPA, but also the entire criminal justice system. There are glaring inefficiencies in prosecuting the most basic of crimes, and the integrated justice framework has not been a success. The victims of crime and whistleblowers have inadequate protection from the law. The diversion programs for children found on the wrong side of the law have failed, and locking children up with common criminals must be condemned. Honorable Chair, we are concerned with the slow pace of implementing some of the recommendations of the Law Reform Commission, such as the delay in reforming the Criminal Law Amendment Act in order to regulate prostitution. We are also unmoved by the poor handling of TRC's recommendations on reparations. Millions of our people run down by the apartheid regime of TRC's the apartheid regime, and who are due to receive reparations are still languishing in poverty. It is also shameful that many of the PAC combatants are still languishing in jail after years of imprisonment. The families of Marikana workers killed for demanding the restoration of their human dignity are still without hope. The genie is out of the bottle. Honorable Chair, we will in due course write to the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development to introduce an executive bill to the RICA Act. This is because as it stands, Section 46(4)(a) of RICA empowers the Minister of Justice if he has exempted any law enforcement agency from the prohibited acts of possessing and purchasing any equipment that is designed to intercept communications to table an exemption certificate before the Assembly for approval. This process must be foolproof and self-cleansing. In this regard, other than relying on the recommendations of Portfolio Committee on Justice and Constitutional Development, that such certificate be approved by the National Assembly. We will recommend an amendment that will see a retired judge permanently employed in the Speaker's office, seized with responsibility of assessing the legal remit of such recommendations before they reach Assembly for approval. Honorable Chair, it will be remiss of us not to acknowledge the work of the SIU, particularly under the able leadership of Advocate Mutiba. The SIU has been a model of success and continues to be leading torchbearer in the criminal justice. We support this e-budget vote, Honorable Chair. Thank you.
Honorable Chapter, please, if you are on the virtual platform, use your ears as well. Your time was up. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honorable Nyonso. Honorable Nyonso, welcome.
House Chairperson, a very strong pillar of the constitutional democracy is the efficacy of the judiciary. We expect the judiciary to be objective, independent, and free from unwarranted influence from the executive. Once this happens, it would mean judiciary is working on quicksand. The PAC raised concern with a case in the Western Cape High Court in which powerful figure in the executive authority is said to have made irregular and unlawful calls to a judge to express their views and wishes on the outcomes of the court ruling. We have lodged the complaint officially with the Western Cape High Court. We are aware of the cat and mouse games that are stretched in the courts to make the cases go away. This will never happen in our watch. We understand the war of attrition, which is meant to exhaust the parties victimized by the elongated time to resolve the matter. The social justice is an ever-present feature in the struggle of communities of the poor, who are constantly shortchanged when it comes to the provision of utilities like safe and clean water, electricity, garbage collection, roads maintenance, and the inspection for municipalities that are goods sold in local outlets are fit and proper for human consumption. The judiciary cannot be two-faced about the ills of social injustice. PAC insists that the majority of the Azanian people cannot be robbed of a quality life and a standard of living that is on par with the benefits of modern technology. The African people cannot continue to be maintained and murdered by thugs, to be maimed and murdered by thugs and robbers who soon after being arrested can be seen roaming the streets and laughing at the victims because the judiciary treats the failures of the prosecutors with kid gloves. Yeah, Comrade Hope. Minister, Hulula Mabanjo were applied wrong with. They fought for freedom. Even those that have been released, they are prisoners, but signing paroles and the parole extension of the sentence. Elinye ibandla lelapha ehousing uKenny Mtsamaile apply lisasayina even to date. We also demand Sobukwe's audio recordings. But the most criminal act that was ever committed by justice system in this country was committed against Mark Steinberg, the founder of Apartheid Museum, and we demand justice for him. Release applicators, Umxelelo Minister, Comrade Ngola. PAC supports this budget votes.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is Honorable Horn. Oh, no, sorry, Honorable Horn. There's Honorable Hendricks has indicated that is available on virtual platform. Honorable Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Al-Jamaa supports this budget. We are very grateful to the Minister for his efforts to reopen the inquest into the death of Imam Abdullah Harun. We look forward to the Minister opening the inquest into the death of Chief Albert Lutuli. Al-Jamaa is a bit concerned, while we support this budget, that the SIU have to beg for money to fund investigations, and they have to depend on different departments in government to pay them when the job is done. And then still they have to send an invoice and wait 30 days. That is not in the interest of justice. Honorable Aldama welcomes plans to develop a system to ensure constant barrier-free access to justice for persons with disabilities, which is, of course, is long overdue, and here the department must be congratulated. Many gender-based violence and domestic violence cases occur due to a father's failure to pay maintenance. Women are often violently attacked when asking their partner for maintenance. The department talks about removing barriers so women can access, but the department itself is committing a great injustice to women and children by allowing the claimant the right not have the traveling fees, and in many cases may decide whether the few pennies she must be spent to put food on the table, to spend a fruitless day at the maintenance courts. The claimant is discriminated against as he does not receive the cash for transport and food expenses for the day, as in the case of the perpetrator, which is men, who refuses to pay maintenance. However, the Portfolio Committee has thrown a lifeline to address this, and we would like to thank them. Alzama supports this budget.
Thank you very much, Honorable Hendricks. The next speaker would be really now Honorable Horn. Welcome, Honorable Horn.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, our country is at a tipping point. What happens in the next 2 years will determine whether we will be classified as a failed state or not. We are at this moment a weakening, increasingly failing state with our justice system, and specifically the criminal justice system, at best limping like a wounded soldier. Therefore, a reflection on the budget and performance of the Department of Justice and the entities and institutions funded through its budget vote must be focused on what we can do to prevent our beloved country from graduating into being a failed state. Minister, the first requirement is a real urgency around strengthening the fight against corruption. Clearly, what's being done at the moment is not delivering the type of results that fosters confidence in the system. Unfortunately, Minister, today you again, in very vague terms, promised strengthening the institutions that fight corruption. Therefore, we must ask, how can it be that 7 months after the President announced, as part of his response to the Zondo Commission report, that the investigative directorate is to become a permanent feature, that the legislative amendments to make this a reality is still really nowhere to be seen? Today, Minister, you referred to an NPA amendment bill. Where is that bill? The clock is ticking. Why, if we really want to fortify our constitutional democracy and the rule of law against the type of subversion it was subjected to between 2003 and 18, is there not a commitment to establishing a fully independent anti-corruption body, firewalled by the type of protection Chapter 9 institutions in the Auditor General enjoys? Minister, how can it be that you and the department jet off on a benchmarking tour to Canada on whistleblower protection regimes? Then today you tell us that you did a further bit of research and that this revealed there's gaps in the protocol. We all knew that. This is much more urgent than that, Minister. Why do you fail and refuse, even as an interim measure, to simply extend witness protection protocols to those who want to blow the whistle on serious corruption, as suggested to you by the NPA 2 years ago already? Chair, and while the fight against corruption and for improved whistleblower protection has been fought up to now with lackluster, careless, and even lazy attitudes, those who have gone to school on corrupt activities are now graduating into fully fledged organized crime. Minister, there's a dire need to act now and to act decisively against organized crime and mafia-style activities. If this is not done immediately, the stranglehold of gangs and cartels on our communities will push us over the cliff into the valley of desolation that's known as the failed state status. It's worrying that there was no announcement on this today. Chair, on an operational level, it must be asked how it can be accepted as the so-called new normal, that the functionality of online and electronic systems of the department is only partially restored after a debilitating ransomware attack caused by the basic in-house failure to, yes, renew antivirus and hacking protections. How can it be accepted, Chair, as the new normal that officials are quite often all over the country left with no other option but to use personal cell phones and own airtime and data to assist victims of crime, simply because contracts for landline telephone services are either not renewed in time or serviced? Minister, if you are told by your top officials that everything at service points is hunky-dory, please don't believe them. There's a huge disjuncture between what your top officials report officially and what is the reality at service points. When we as members of the Portfolio Committee, irrespective of whether it's personal visits or formal oversight visits of Parliament, engage with those working in our courts, we invariably are informed that slow, often online systems, continued problems with court recording technology, audio-visual systems in sexual offences courts that is continuously not working, along with serious weaknesses in the provision of security at our courts and a vexing struggle to get the most basic of maintenance to our court buildings done, all undermine not only the morale, but the objective ability of the state's role players in the justice system to deliver. Chair, it's become somewhat of a cliche to say that the definition of insanity is to keep on doing the same things and expect different outcomes. But yet, when it comes to the development of the integrated justice system, and specifically the integrated criminal justice system, and the way in which the same interventions, although given different names, are continuously being announced by the department to get this project going, a project which has over the last decade gulped up hundreds of millions of rands without any working product ever being in sight, this is exactly what comes to mind. Again today, Minister, phrases like court modernization and digitization was thrown around by you as if this project was not initialized in 2011 already. At some point, Minister, the responsible thing must surely be to admit failure and, if necessary, to start from scratch. This time bypassing the mediocre ANC cadres, whose continued involvement will again fail to deliver a functional system. Only the involvement of real experts can give this project a realistic chance of success. It's as simple as that. Chair, it's 5 minutes to midnight. Even the Deputy Minister said today to the Minister, we don't have time to waste. Therefore, Minister, the time is now to start showing some urgency and grit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Horn. The next speaker is Honorable Ngola. Welcome, Honorable Ngola. We have additional 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Allow us to extend our greetings to you, the Minister, the Deputy Minister, members of the House. I also wish to plead with you firstly that you don't allow Mr. Paulson to attempt to downgrade this house into a gossip forum. He hears some fictitious things there out on the streets, comes to this house screaming and kicking and want to drag this house to that thing. But Honorable Hope Papo made a proper summary that the problem is that Mr. Paulson is a political lightweight.
Chairperson.
Thank you.
What are we debating, justice? Or
In the case of
No.
Chabalala versus the state.
Sit down and raise your hand. Can sit down and raise your hand.
Then I'm happy.
Honorable Paulson.
Of debate.
Honorable Paulson, sit down. And then if you want to be recognized, you can raise your hand.
In the case of Chabalala versus the state, Ntuli versus the state, the Constitutional Court made the following remarks. Rape is a very serious offense, constituting as it does a humiliating, degrading, brutal invasion of the privacy, the dignity and the person of the victim. The rights to dignity, to privacy, and the integrity of every person are basic to the ethos of the Constitution and to any defensible civilization. Women in this country are entitled to protection of these rights. They have a legitimate claim to walk peacefully on the streets, to enjoy their shopping and their entertainment, to go and come from work, and to enjoy the peace and tranquility of their homes without the fear, the apprehension, and the insecurity which constantly diminishes the quality of enjoyment of their lives. The court further says, the facts of this case demonstrate that for far too long, rape has been used as a tool to relegate the women of this country to second-class citizens, over whom men can exercise their power and control, and in so doing, strip them of their rights to equality, human dignity, and bodily integrity. The high incidence of sexual violence suggests that male control over women and notions of sexual entitlement feature strongly in the social construction of masculinity in South Africa. Some men view sexual violence as a method of reasserting masculinity and controlling women. As we debate on this budget vote on justice and constitutional development, it is important that we take a moment and consider the most vulnerable in our society who suffer injustices. We remember the men, women who have lost their lives, gender-based violence and femicide. We remember those members of the LGBTQI community who were violated, some murdered because of their sexual orientation. We remember the persons living in disability who were harmed and unfortunately were unable to express themselves. We remember those who opted not to report those acts of violence inflicted upon them and chose to live in silence. No one should ever go through such ordeals. Everyone in this country has a legitimate right to human dignity, not to be violated. This budget vote is meant, among others, address those issues. In fact, this budget vote is meant to ensure that justice is not only done, but also seen to be done. Honorable Chair, GBV goes against the ethos of the Bill of Rights. It is a serious human rights violation with major social and developmental impacts for survivors of violence, as well as their families, communities, and society at large. On an individual level, GBV leads to a psychological trauma and can have psychological, behavioral, and physical consequences for survivors. In many parts of the country, there is a poor access to formal psychosocial or even medical support, which means that many survivors are unable to access the help they need. Families and loved ones of survivors can also experience indirect trauma, and many do not know how to provide effective support. As the sixth administration nears its sunset, and we reflect on the work done, we'll remember that President Ramaphosa expressed the country's commitment to addressing the scourge of GBV-F and announced the emergency response plan to address GBV, which includes strengthening the applicable legislative framework. As the legislative arm of the state, we were seized with the duty to create laws to this effect. Parliament considered and passed what is commonly referred to as the 3 bills on gender-based violence. Making good of his commitment, the president assented to laws that strengthen fight against gender-based violence in January last year. These pieces of legislation are the Criminal and Related Matters Act, Domestic Violence Amendment Act, and the Criminal Law Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act. Welcome the new directives in terms of the Domestic Violence Amendment Act 2021, which commenced on the 4th of April 2023. The directives impose stricter duties on the office managers, supervisors, and clerks of the court when dealing with cases of domestic violence. If any official does not comply with the new directives, disciplinary action will be taken against them. We also welcome the inclusion of a new indicator in the department's APP, percentage of domestic violence protection orders served by the clerks of the court on parties present at court within 24 hours from the time the order is granted to the court. This is an important step towards improving the treatment of GBV victims. In communities across South Africa, Futuzela care centers offer comfort, medical care, access to legal system, and counseling for survivors of sexual violence. The centers are a partnership between donors and government departments under the leadership of the National Prosecuting Authorities, Sexual Offences and Community Affairs. Futuzela centers are a critical tool in government's integrated strategy to combat sexual violence. The centers link police stations, with clinics and hospital, and the re-established sexual offences court. The Tutuzela Center's most important role is to support victims. The philosophy is respect, comfort, restoring dignity, and ensuring justice for children and women who are victims of sexual violence. We know that the MPA reports that it exceeded its target for the conviction of sexual offences. And in another positive development, the number of TCCs increased from 55 to 62. Honorable Yako, the NPA you call toothless is the one who has exceeded a target and actually increased the availability of Tutuzela care centers from 55 to 62. The NPA is working with the private sector to set up new TCCs. Further, much work is being done on the DNA backlog project, despite the many challenges, and appears to be paying dividends. This is welcome. Chairperson, research shows that GBV negatively impacts the physical, mental, and sexual health of victims, as well as the social and economic aspects of their lives. For example, there is emerging evidence that GBV may result in children growing up without their biological fathers. There is a paucity of literature on father absence in Africa. Published data suggests that between 30% and 50% of South African children grow up without their biological fathers, with Black African children being most affected. Father absence is a term that is rarely defined in the literature. However, studies have shown that fathers can be absent in the lives of their children fully, partially, economically, and emotionally. The term father absence in this study refers to biological fathers who are absent in their lives, in the lives of their children due to disappearance in the early stages of the child's life, or those who are known to be alive or perceived to be alive, but since the early stages of the child's life have been emotionally and economically absent, leading to children feeling neglected or abandoned. While there is a scant literature on this topic in South Africa, mounting evidence suggests that growing up with an absent father is a risk factor for perpetration by boys or men. Studies have demonstrated that men who perpetrate violence against women are likely to be those who did not co-reside with their biological fathers, had poor father-son relations, or did not even know their fathers. This then begs the question, what are we doing as men in society? What role are we playing in our homes as fathers, brothers, uncles, and partners in ensuring a safer South Africa? Women in South Africa deserve to be safe and free from all forms of violence. We all have a role to play in making South Africa very, very much great. Chairperson, when time allows, we, the ANC, will roll out a debate on what we call the motive forces of our own people, so that we are able to at least unleash some teachings towards some of the members in the House, that it's those who stand to benefit the most from the gains of the revolution. So Honorable Yago does not have to come here and try to present herself as a representative of the poor, whilst we have a stand on what is the motive force, which is the ANC that represents the motive forces in our country. Honorable Chairperson, there is an issue that keeps on popping when we discuss here of a particular fictitious persecution of the public protector, which I think we must stand here, particularly as members of the Justice Portfolio Committee and as members of the Section 194 Committee. We draw our mandate from the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, Section 194. We draw our mandate from the rules of the National Assembly. We draw our mandate from the court rulings that have been issued out or ordered by the various courts of South Africa that actually allow us to proceed with our work on behalf of the people of South Africa. Honorable House Chair, Honorable Mulder comes here and just tell us that he has just given up, they are hopeless, that they can't be a majority party themselves. So they rely on a spaza shop kind of a perceived coalition, that they do not strive to be a party that represents the vast majority of our own people, in that they must create some relations for them to lead our own people. Honorable Sheikh, we agree, and Honorable Deputy Minister, that we still relate with the struggles of the Palestinian people. Undoubtedly, we relate with the struggles of the people of Palestine, and we still believe that through the international solidarity as a pillar of our revolution, people from Palestine are going to be free. Honorable House Chair, the ANC support the budget vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ngola. The next speaker is the Honorable Minister of Justice and Correctional Services. Welcome, Honorable Minister. Honorable Ngola has served 2 minutes. They have been so generous to you, Honorable Minister. Serve your time.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson. And I thank all honorable members for their constructive inputs. Indeed,
Sorry, Honorable Minister. Mr. Matlatsi, Honorable Matlatsi.
House Chair, it's Malatsi.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, and apologies to the Minister. But Chair, I don't think it's correct that the members can transfer their time to the Minister. That would be inappropriate. So can we correct that so that the Minister uses his own time? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. If you could turn around and look into what is presented now, it's a real time for the Minister, which is 5 minutes. Minister.
yeah, thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson. All the constructive inputs will help us to build this capable state of ours. Indeed, there is no government in the world that does not have challenges. The issue is how as a country and as a state we rise above those challenges, respond to them, confront them. And I think this sixth administration is capable of confronting the challenges facing this country. And it is for that reason that we continue to provide the necessary support to the National Prosecuting Authority. And as I've said, we have given them an additional grant of 915 million for them to be able to attend to the crippling challenges of crime that the country is facing, organized crime, corruption, and related matters, including the challenges that are faced by state-owned enterprises. And you will realize that there are cases that are already enrolled related to some of the state-owned enterprises, ESCOM, Transnet, PRASA, and there's also been about 4 billion reparation amount that has been paid back by ABB to the fiscals of this country. So that shows that the wheels of justice are already rolling in this regard. And the SIU has also recovered millions of rands. The asset forfeiture unit has also obtained recoveries which amount to about 2.83 billion rands, which is a clear, concrete evidence of the work that is happening within the National Prosecuting Authority. And there could have been cases and challenges, but the reality is that the wheels of justice is turning. And with the cases that they handle almost annually, the conviction rate is very high. So collectively as a country, we have a responsibility to provide the support and give them the necessary resources that they need. And that is what we have done as a Department of Justice. With regards to the issues raised for the Legal Aid South Africa, the transfer of the Land Rights Management Facility has been a revolutionary intervention by the state. If there are challenges that are crippling in because of that. It is what we need to attend. But we are continuously engaged with the National Treasury to assist to find the resources and the money that must cover the gap that has came through as a result of the contingent liability. With regards to the cases that have been said that we have bungled it, we have not bungled any matter, including the Gupta extradition case. We have complied with every requirement as per the extradition treaty between South Africa and the UAE. And as a result, we will have a meeting with the authorities in the UAE on the 5th of June to iron out all the issues that emanated from the matter and also on the way forward. The red notice remains valid, which means that if the Gupta brothers go to any country where the red notice is active, there is still an obligation to that country to arrest them. So the matter has not been bungled, it is being handled, and we are proceeding. And these honorable members were also very critical about the Bushir matter. Now that the wheels of justice are rolling in Malawi as they are supposed to, the members are shifting the goalposts. But we are going to allow the courts of Malawi to process the matter so that justice prevails. And we want to assure South Africans that with all extradition matters, they are protracted in their nature, but justice will prevail at the end. They will definitely come back at some stage to answer